All right, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We will go ahead and get started. So this is our first community forum for Resilient Together, the Point. We will go over a few things. What is climate change and how will it affect me? Specifically for people who live, work, and commute in the Point, but of course this information is great for anyone who just wants to learn a bit more. During the presentation, there will be some live translations as well as text translations for those who have no or limited English proficiency. There will also be a separate recording of this presentation in Spanish that we will post on our website online. And community members can view that one and this one at a later date. We'll also be posting the slides. Hola a todos, muchas gracias por unirse a la primera presentación de la comunidad por el proyecto Preservemos el Punto Todos Juntos. Repasaremos qué es el cambio climático y cómo me afecta específicamente para las personas que viven, trabajan y viajan en el punto. Durante la presentación habrá algunas traducciones en vivo, así como traducciones de texto para las personas que tienen una comprensión limitada del inglés. También habrá una grabación separada de esta presentación en español que publicará en el sitio web para que los miembros de la comunidad la vean más adelante. Next slide. I'll pass it to Kate.
And tonight's a great night to ask questions, so please feel free to ask questions throughout the forum using the Zoom Q&A feature. The icon looks like a chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to respond during both the middle and the end of the presentation.
So this is the agenda for tonight. We will introduce the project and introduce the team members. We'll talk more about the Point neighborhood, and then we'll get into understanding the impacts of climate change and future flooding in the Point. And then we will talk about next steps in the project. Next slide. So this is some of our amazing team. We have Jenna Ide on the line, who is the Director of Sustainability, Capital, and Resiliency for the City of Salem. Myself, Esmeralda Bisono, I'm the Sustainability and Resiliency Manager for the city. Kate Kennedy is a planner in the city, and Chris Malmstrom is the lead outreach coordinator. And I will pass it to Nasser and Dr. Fabian to introduce their team.
Thank you. I'm Nasser Rahim. I am the project manager for the consultant team, and I work at Woods Hole Group. I'm a senior climate resiliency specialist. He also is Dr. Fabian Torres Ardila from UMass Boston's Gaston Institute, and Despo Toma from Scape Landscape Architecture, as well as Maria Palomares from Scape Landscape Architecture as well. And in addition to those on this slide, there are others on our team, including Salem Sound Coast Watch. Next. Sorry, next slide.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Hello, good evening. My name is Fabian Torres Ardila. I am the Associate Director of the Mauricio Gaston Institute. I am partnering with WHJ, and the City of Salem to be part of the process to outreach the community, because the activities of the community don't only involve technical aspects, it also includes a component of reach out to the community through different activities. One of the things that I will invite you is to contact me in case you are interested in being interviewed or participating in other activities of the project. Mi nombre es Fabián Torres Ardila, yo soy el director asociado del Instituto Mauricio Gaston en la Universidad de Boston. Solo quería decirles que el Gaston Institute está colaborando en este proyecto en otro tipo de actividades, no solo técnicas, sino también de hacer un contacto con la comunidad y a través de entrevistas y otras actividades planeadas para los residentes de la comunidad. Yo también voy a estar ayudando hoy, contribuyendo con la traducción al inglés, al español de algunas diapositivas. Next. You can go next, Tespo.
Esmeralda, do you want to highlight the website as well here?
Sure, yeah. Anyone who's attending can go to our website, publicinput.com/thepoint, where we'll upload all materials, recordings, surveys, anything else that you need to know about the project. That would be a great website to post on people's social medias or send to their friends and family as well on the point. Next slide. Okay.
So throughout the forum tonight, we will be asking a few questions about your thoughts and experiences. We are using a neat survey website called Mentimeter to see your responses in real time. So we will give folks a few minutes right now to open up a new tab on your device and go to menti.com and enter code 75771224. And that is M as in Madre, E as in Espanol, N as in number, T as in tree, I as in ice, menti.com. And you will also be able to scan this QR code to get to menti.com. And again, the code is 75771224.
We'll leave this slide up for a minute so everyone can see the code.
And if anyone has trouble accessing the website, you may also type your response into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and we will try our best to enter it into the site for you.
All right, so we will get into the project introduction. Next slide. We did just want to have a short definition of climate change, but there will be much more on this topic coming up. So climate change is defined as the long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns, sometimes used interchangeably with global warming. Climate change is caused by air pollution from human activities like burning fossil fuels. Next. So this project, Resilient Together, The Point, continues the efforts of Salem and Beverly's 2021 Resilient Together Climate Action Plan. Through this project, we are seeking to address present and future climate risk in one of Salem's most socially vulnerable neighborhoods. The outcome of this will be an action plan to make the Point community more resilient to climate change. We in the city of Salem envision that this will be the first of several neighborhood climate change projects. And these are 4 objectives that we have for the project, which are to provide a multilingual community outreach, education, and engagement process, map predictions of future flooding from sea level rise, storm surge, and rain, assess how vulnerable populations and community assets will be affected by this flooding, and develop specific recommendations to make the community more resilient to future flooding and extreme heat. So we really appreciate everyone coming to this forum. This is really going to help us with these project objectives. Next slide. So now I'm
Thank you.
passing
And so,
to Nasser. Okay.
So this project started in December and around the holidays, and it is going to be complete by June 30th. It is funded by a state, it is funded with support from the state through the Coastal Zone Management Program. And the project has 4 phases. You can see here, each one takes about 2 months or so. We're starting out with understanding the existing conditions in the point. The next step is modeling future flooding and assessing vulnerabilities. Again, similar to the objective saw on the previous slide. The next phase after that will be developing strategies and priorities. And the last stage will be preparing the draft and then the final plan. And you can see here that in parallel with these kind of technically focused phases of the project, we have ongoing community outreach, education, and engagement activities as well. And we'll be conducting interviews with individuals as well as public surveys, the first of which is posted on the publicinput.com/elpunto or the Point website. And in addition to those activities, we also have specific events. So we are here today on the first community forum, focusing on understanding the first two phases, the understanding existing conditions and some of the vulnerabilities. There will be a community mapping event. If you're interested in participating in that, please contact Fabian. And then we'll be having two additional community forums later in the year, in the spring and early summer to, again, catch up with the community, explore these strategies and priorities, and then to share and get feedback on a draft plan. Next, please. Oh, sorry, no. Fabián.
Gracias, Nasser. Thank you, Nasser. Este diagrama muestra el cronograma de actividades del proyecto. Son esencialmente 4 tipos de actividades, entendiendo acerca de entender las condiciones existentes en el proyecto, crear un modelo, crear estrategias y prioridades y preparar un reporte final para que toda la comunidad entienda las recomendaciones. Tiene 2 componentes, un componente técnico que está coordinado por Nasser y su equipo, y un componente de outreach to the community, educación y trabajar con la comunidad a través de una serie de eventos. Estamos planeando tener 4 eventos en los cuales nos vamos a reunir con la comunidad. Este es el primero. Va a haber 2 más, uno al final de la primavera, otro al inicio del verano. En adición, además de eso, vamos a tener 2 eventos para los cuales les estamos invitando a los residentes que se llaman Community Mapping, un mapeo de la comunidad. Vamos a invitar residentes para que vayan con nosotros y caminen a través de la zona y nos cuenten sus experiencias con cambio climático. You can go next.
So it should be clear that this project is focused on the point, El Punto. We've shown here the boundaries of the project area, which extends, people have different ways of thinking about where this project is located, but we're defining it based on this orange boundary here. So from the South River around Peabody Street, all the way south to the Pioneer Terrace and Palmer Cove. And then also from Canal Street on the west, all the way over to Shetland Park and the harbor on the east.
So en este mapa estamos haciendo un diagrama de más o menos el área que cubre este proyecto, de Palmer Cove, the Point o el punto, y las áreas que las rodean, además de cuáles son las fronteras físicas. Esencialmente las calles que ustedes conocen, Canal Street, Cedar Street, La Bahía y Peabody Street. Next.
So we're going to start with the first Mentimeter activity. And so if you look back on your phone or if you join on your laptop or your computer, you can now enter what is your relationship with the point. Are you a worker, a resident, renter, supporter, elected official, anything? You can see some results coming in already. People visit, they have friends in the area, they're residents, they work there, they go to school there, they work there. Supporter, friend, neighbor. Lots of workers and visitors, students. President of the neighborhood. Presidente. Owner home. Elected official. Supporters. Fantastic. It looks like we have a great cross-section of the community here. Supporters, people who value the community, those with a very direct stake in what happens both today and in the future. Great. Well, thank you. We're gonna, we will also take care, summary of this information will be provided at the end for people who didn't participate today to know who was here, who was answering these questions and what their perspectives is. But thank you for all of you for joining. Next slide.
All right, so we wanted to start by acknowledging the point of Pundo, the neighborhood that we're focusing in, and discussing with you. We wanted to sort of describe how we perceive the neighborhood from our interactions with you and confirm these characteristics and these challenges that we identified with you. So please do let us know in the Q&A if we did get this right, or if there's something else that we need to be aware of. So the point, a vibrant and unique neighborhood, we understand that it's a diverse community with the majority of residents identifying as minorities, up to 72% compared to 31% in the city of Salem.
So, entendemos que esta es una comunidad diversa en la cual la comunidad del punto, alrededor de 7 de cada 10, el 72% de todos los residentes se reconocen como minorías étnicas, comparado con el 30% fuera del punto. Next.
We also understand that there is a strong Hispanic community, specifically in El Punto, with residents identifying as Hispanic or Latinx, up to 62%, a number that is triple the amount to the city of Salem as a whole.
También entendemos que es una comunidad, es una comunidad hispana fuerte, donde aproximadamente el 62% de todos los residentes se reconocen como hispanos, comparado con el 20%. Eso quiere decir que el 75% de todos los hispanos de Salem viven en el punto. Next.
It is also a very walkable but dense neighborhood. We see that 35 people per acre live in the point, compared to a much lower number in the city as a whole, which is closer to 8.
También sabemos que es una comunidad en la cual se puede caminar, pero también es densa en términos de población. Aproximadamente 35 personas por acre viven en el punto, comparado con 8 personas por acre fuera del punto.
It is also a community of renters. We see that 83% of the units, the housing units in the point, are considered rentals, a number that is almost double to the 48% for the city as a whole.
También es una comunidad en la que la mayoría de la gente que vive es arrendatario. 8 de cada 10, el 83%, comparado con los otros residentes de Salem fuera del punto, en donde el porcentaje de arrendatarios es 48%, o sea que en el punto es casi el doble que el número de porcentaje de arrendatarios fuera del punto. Esto.
There are also some challenges and barriers we want to acknowledge here. The point is a community with larger unemployment rates. We see that the unemployment rate is double that of the city, with 8% over 10% of the city.
También queremos reconocer que hay algunos retos que aparecen en la comunidad. Uno de ellos es el hecho de que en la comunidad del punto hay una tasa de desempleo del 8%, que es el doble del 4% de la tasa de desempleo fuera del punto.
And also a community facing income inequalities. We see that the median yearly household income at the point is half of what the city as a whole averaged.
También vemos que es una comunidad que se enfrenta a una gran desigualdad de ingresos. Por ejemplo, en el punto, el ingreso promedio es de $30,000 al año, comparado con $69,000 al año fuera del punto, o sea, algo menos de la mitad. Next.
So why all of this matters? The point is a designated environmental justice community by the state. And this is based on the historic and current system injustices that are affecting people of color or people speaking different languages other than English and people with low income. And we understand that climate change disproportionately impacts neighborhoods like the Point. Residents are more vulnerable to flooding and extreme heat in this instance. They face greater dangers to health and economic well-being, and more resources are required for residents to prepare for, respond to, and recover from climate change impacts. So the city prioritized planning in the Point for these following reasons. It's already at risk from flooding and extreme heat. The Point will experience more intense hazards from climate change that will become more frequent and severe in the future because of climate change. And people's health, finances, housing, infrastructure, and environment will be impacted as the climate change worsens. In addition, there are opportunities in the Point to act now and prevent a lot of those impacts. There are unique assets that provide a strong foundation for building resilience. There are potential public and private investments that are related to resilience that could be directed in this neighborhood. And there are community-based solutions with strong public participation that can come out of this process.
So now thank you. Now we'll be discussing what are the impacts of climate change that we expect to see in the Point. Next slide, please. So this project will be working together to address these different vulnerabilities. So the first one, extreme heat, rainfall, flooding from heavy rainfall events, storm surge, which is when you have a storm like a hurricane or a nor'easter that pushes water up and into the neighborhood, and sea level rise, which is a slow increase in water levels that eventually can lead to a high tide being higher and even flooding the neighborhood as well. We'll be talking about each of these as we move forward here. Go ahead to the next. Thank you. So the first one we want to talk about is extreme heat. And we want to start out by just saying that climate change will make heat days, which are classified as 90 degrees Fahrenheit or more, 3 to 5 times more frequent in the North Shore region, including the Point, including Salem, et cetera. So while there are maybe 8 days historically in the recent past, there have been on average 8 days per year that reach this hot level. In the future, there's going to be 23 to even 43. And these will increase over time. And this is what we expect 50 years from now, that the climate will be very different. It will be a lot hotter in the Point. So if you've noticed that the very hot days are becoming more frequent, it's not your imagination. It's actually happening. Next, please. And while I showed you that in the North Shore broadly, the number of 90-degree days is going up, there's also, the Point is already one of the hottest parts of Salem. So this map here shows you the red, those are hotter areas, and the lighter colors, the yellows, et cetera, are cooler areas. So the Point has a lot of pavement. It has a lot of dark roofs. Some roofs have been painted white. There are less trees because of the density. There are less green areas to absorb, to kind of cool things down. So all those pavements and hot roofs, they soak up the heat and then they release it slowly, and that makes the area hotter. It's called the urban heat island effect, and it happens in very dense areas like the Point. So while an average average extremely hot day in the North Shore is actually even hotter in the Point, and even on a little bit less than a 90-degree day, it may be 90 degrees in the Point. So those previous numbers that I showed you, those may be underestimating really the impact in the Point today.
En las anteriores, no, sorry,
Sorry, no, go ahead, please.
En las anteriores diapositivas estábamos hablando que cambio climático puede producir mayor cantidad de días con temperaturas mayor a 90 grados. Pero lo que se sabe es que ahora mismo en el punto es la zona más caliente de Salem. Ya se sabe, por ejemplo, que debido a que tiene mayor número de calles pavimentadas, tiene techos de las casas más oscuros y menos zonas verdes, ya es más caliente que los alrededores. Es lo que se llama una isla de calor urbana. Y lo que sabemos es que el cambio climático va a empeorar la situación. E incluso en los días en los cuales la temperatura no llegue a 90 grados Fahrenheit, en el punto se va a sentir mucho más caliente que 90 grados Fahrenheit. Next.
And so why are we worried about this? Well, one of the main reasons we're worried is that increased extremely hot days has a health impact on people. It can lead to increased hospitalizations and deaths from heat-related illnesses. It can worsen air pollution and respiratory problems like asthma. And some people are more vulnerable to these impacts than others. And many of the characteristics are the same as we discussed previously: environmental justice communities, lower income people, people with higher exposures that live in urban heat islands, and people also that are very young, very old, or work outdoors as well. And in addition to health impacts, increased heat also can raise the cost of air conditioning. At the same time, the other side of that is that, you know, we may have less cost for heating in the winter if it's a little bit warmer, which is good. But the increase in air conditioning and also the impact of heat on electrical equipment can lead to increased frequency of power outages. And when we lose power, that has a lot of other impacts as well. So we'd like to get a little bit of feedback from you in past living in the point or visiting or in your own neighborhood. How has extreme heat impacted you? So go ahead back to your Mentimeter and you can enter your thoughts there. So we see a lot of the impacts already here. We have some health impacts like dehydration or people avoiding going out and exercising. We talked about the economic impacts, the higher costs for cooling due to air conditioning. We talked about, well, encourages you to visit the beach. So there's a good side. We should take advantage of the benefits as well. But less opportunities for exercising, higher energy costs. These seem to be things that people, you know, is very common to a lot of different people. Higher electricity bills, which of course impacts people's pocketbook and their financial health. Other health effects as well: heat exhaustion, feeling really tired in the heat unexpectedly. Well, thank you. It's really good to know that so many people are having the same experience, because hopefully that will be, you know, motivation for kind of participating in this process to help us identify some things that can be done in the neighborhood to help reduce the impact of heat. There are different types of strategies, and sort of some of the next phases of this project will focus on how do we address this. Next slide, please. So another major part of this project is focused on flooding. And I said in the beginning, there are kind of different kinds of flooding that are shown here: rainfall, storm surge, and sea level rise. Next, please. One of the things that sea level rise does, that's the SLR here, stands for sea level rise, is that it's really worsening the impact of these different flood events. So on the left-hand side is kind of like a common storm today. You know, it rains, there may be some puddles on the side of the street. But what we see is that something on the right-hand side, which is today's very extreme event, that's actually going to be the common storm of the future. And so sea level rise is one of the main reasons. It's just making the overall water level higher so that even a smaller storm can cause a lot of flooding.
Lo que queremos ilustrar aquí con estas dos figuras es el efecto que va a tener el cambio en el nivel del mar producido por el cambio climático. Una de las cosas que nosotros sabemos es que al aumentar el nivel del mar, al incrementarse, una tormenta que era muy rara en el pasado se va a volver muy común, precisamente por el efecto del cambio del nivel del mar. Aunque esto puede pasar, este pronóstico es para el 2070, esto está cambiando de manera continua y lenta. Básicamente lo que antes era raro ahora se va a volver muy común, y es especialmente todos estos eventos extremos. Next, Nancy.
And this figure, again, just kind of reiterates the point that an event that is rare today, right? The rare event is like we had in January and March of 2018, where Palmer Cove spilled into the park, right? And affected streets and other parts of Salem. Those rare events have a big impact. But those are the rare events of today. And because of sea level rise, we see that, you know, in 20 years, in 30 or 20 years, those events are going to become much more frequent. And then in 50 years, those are going to be happening all of the time, right? So every year we can expect to see events like that. And so planning for that today makes a lot of sense, right? It makes sense to plan for something that could impact us today, something very rare, but something that can have an extreme impact, and something that we know is going to become even more frequent going forward in the future. Next, please. Now, this project is also going to be looking at how does rainfall affect flooding in the point. And there's not a good existing source of information for this. And the city and the team are developing a model, engineering model, that is going to help us to better understand which areas are affected by flooding from rainfall. And we're not just going to look at rainfall. We know that when there's a lot of rain or there's too much in a very short period of time, that the water can't drain away. It can't come off the streets and then go into the harbor. That's what usually happens, right? We know that when sea level rises, the water from the coast, from the ocean, from the harbor is going to fill up those pipes already. So there's going to be even less space for water to drain, which means that a smaller storm, smaller rainfall can produce the same amount of flooding as something that's very big today. And we'll be looking again at where are the areas that are impacted by that kind of flooding. And then finally, when we combine sea level rise, filling up those pipes on a daily basis all the time, with a big storm from the coast, bringing that storm surge, bringing that extra water from the ocean into the neighborhood, and also rainfall, that it can actually make water levels even deeper, which poses a bigger danger for people and for infrastructure. So we'll be looking at all these things going forward, but this is an early explanation of why we care about rainfall and how it impacts the point.
Una de las cosas que este proyecto busca entender es cuál es el efecto de la lluvia y cómo va a impactar las futuras inundaciones cuando se combina con los otros eventos de cambio climático. Esencialmente en esta figura hay 3 ejemplos de cómo la lluvia afecta las inundaciones. En el primer caso tenemos que la sola lluvia, cuando llueve mucho, eso llena las cañerías y en algún momento las cañerías no tienen la capacidad y por eso comienzan a inundarse las calles. Lo que pasa cuando la lluvia se combina con el aumento en el nivel del mar es que el aumento del nivel del mar llena las cañerías también y entonces una lluvia, así sea muy pequeña, va a producir inundaciones. Y lo que ya sabemos es que además de eso, además del aumento del nivel del mar, existen marejadas debido a una tormenta, entonces no va a haber espacio para la lluvia para irse a ningún lugar y es cuando se producen las mayores inundaciones. Uno de los principales objetivos de este proyecto es entender qué áreas van a ser afectadas por este tipo de fenómeno y crear mapas para que la ciudad pueda responder de una manera más eficiente a estos eventos. Next, Nasser.
So again, in this project, we're looking at all of these different kinds of flooding, all these different reasons why it might flood. We have some existing information on the impact of storm surge and sea level rise, and we are developing information on rain and flooding. And then we're going to be looking at all three together. But today we're going to be showing you some of this early information on storm surge and sea level rise to start the conversation, to begin the conversation about vulnerabilities, about which areas of the point are vulnerable and how that affects you. So what we're showing here, you can see the outline in blue. These are areas that are currently at risk of flooding from a very rare but extreme event. You know, they could be a little bit bigger than what we saw in 2018. And this is also the same area that is going to be impacted more commonly, you know, on average once every 10 years or so. In about, 20 or 30 years, this will become more common. You know, people will experience this while living in the neighborhood. And then it's the very scary part is that this is what we anticipate. This is the same area that we anticipate will be impacted every year. About 50 years from now, this is the area that could be impacted every year. And so we know that that's not sustainable, and we're trying to be proactive. The city is being proactive in helping the community start to plan for that scenario.
Lo que queremos mostrar en este mapa es el área que será afectada por una inundación o por un evento climático grande. En este momento, este mapa muestra lo que sabemos ahora, que es el área afectada por una tormenta muy poco común, parece un poco tan poco común como la que pasó en el 2018. Pero lo que sabemos también es que si no hacemos nada, si no se hace nada, en el 2050 o en el 2070, en 30, 50 años adelante, lo que antes era raro será común. Y esta área que ustedes ven en el mapa será inundada todos los años, probablemente muchas veces. Eso es algo que no es sostenible, ni para la ciudad ni para los residentes del área. Y por eso es que la administración de la ciudad ha decidido ser un poquitico más proactive para empezar a hacer algo para mejorar o aliviar el efecto de estos eventos en el futuro. Thanks, Nasser.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to go back to the Mentimeter, and we're curious to learn from you, what about flooding worries you? You saw some of the maps, we talked about the different kinds of flooding, and we'd like to get a sense for what is it about this flooding that concerns you the most. So people are naturally concerned about their property or their home, not being able to go to work, damage to their property, deaths, or even loss of access to their properties, even getting out to do the daily activities that they do, like going shopping, impacts to the coastline, damage to natural resources, school children, losing access to services, including medical. I'm having a tough time seeing the additional ones that came in here. Backed up sewers, loss of housing, power outages, disruption for all of Salem, recognizing that the point, we're just focusing here on the point, but there are other systems outside of the point that people in the point rely on. and sewer overflows. That's what sewer overflow is, when a lot of rain or storm water gets into the sewer system, the sanitary sewer system where you flush your toilet. And that can result in sewage being spilled out into the street, into a basement, into the ocean, into rivers. People trapped in their homes, emergency services. So you are all very, very right on so far. You know, everybody really, the different responses that you came in with make a lot of sense to this team. From what we've seen and learned about the neighborhood, these different types of impacts are significant. And again, like with how to address the risks from heat, this project is going to be working with you, with community members, to look at strategies and compare different options for how do we reduce the vulnerability from flooding, and then to prioritize what is the most important thing, what should happen soon versus 20 years from now or beyond. Yep, access for people with disabilities and elderly people. Mold generation. Yep, this is a problem when water gets into residential spaces, basements, even commercial, businesses. Mold can grow in the walls if it's not cleaned properly and quickly, and that has impacts on families and people's health. Thank you. I think we're going to move on to the next slide here. So we wanted to point out here that the city of Salem values El Punto, values the point, and is committed to keeping it a safe, thriving, and affordable and livable place. Right. This project could have selected any neighborhood, but it focused on this neighborhood because we know that this is a vulnerable area, and the city has been working to try to improve the neighborhood alongside many community partners. And everybody needs a safe community that's protected from extreme weather. So while there is some scary information here that makes you feel uncomfortable about the situation, there's also hope. There's also opportunity, and we'll be trying to raise that with you going forward. Next, please. So that was a lot of information, a lot of technical information on flooding and heat and future and now and how it impacts you. So we're going to take a quick look at the Q&A. If you have additional questions, please put it in there, and we are going to try to answer some of those questions now. Let's put our.
So the questions we had so far, we were able to answer in the Q&A, so we can keep going and return back to the Q&A session at the end. Great.
Perfecto.
But keep your questions coming in the Q&A.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, moving on. So you all did a great job of really answering this question: how will future flooding impact the point? How will it affect you as stakeholders in the point? We're going to be sharing some of the details, more specifically of different kinds of impacts, many of which reflect the things that you said. We're also going to be relating those back to what we understand some of the community priorities are. And there probably are other community priorities, and we hope to learn about those from you and incorporate that in the work going forward. So one of the key priorities of the neighborhood is safe, affordable, and healthy housing. It is one of the more affordable neighborhoods in the city. There's been a lot of progress to date with renovation and modernization of affordable housing, with the city working with partners like North Shore CDC and others, Salem Housing Authority. There's been new affordable housing being developed, and also there are annual partnerships and funding to support renters and owners in improving the affordability of housing. Next, please. But how are residents impacted potentially by flooding? So one key thing to remember is that because we have 83% again renters in the neighborhood, 83% of units rather being rental units, that most renters lack flood insurance and are also ineligible for certain kinds of federal disaster assistance. And so you're kind of left to deal with it on your own. And maybe you have a good landlord that treats you well and helps resolve issues, but maybe you don't. But how can people be impacted as residents? There's health and safety hazards. It's obviously very stressful to have to deal with flooding in your home. There may be costs to relocate temporarily while work is being done, while there's damage to your house. You may be left with decreased quality of housing after a flood, including the mold and things we talked about before. Personal vehicles, people rely on their vehicles for work. Your vehicle, if it's in the street, may be flooded, may be damaged. And there's also, other impacts like loss of power, heating, cooling, things that you rely to make a house safe. So that goal of a safe, affordable housing is very, very much a risk for this neighborhood. And of course, for the property owners, there's a lot of costs. There's cleanup costs to deal with the things like mold remediation. There's the cost of repairing damage to the structure, to the utilities. And it also over time can lower property value or raise insurance costs. And one of the things I wanted to mention was just the basements, right? Basements are like the first place that's going to flood is the basement. So keep an eye, what is in your basement? How important is what's in there? And can you do something to reduce the risk that's down there? So this map shows the residential housing and the impact on residential buildings rather. There are about 100 residential buildings, including 27 affordable housing and public housing buildings that will be impacted. So a third of the housing impacted is affordable housing, and that's of concern. Next, please. Oh,
Maria?
Marian, sorry, Maria.
I'm sorry, having some difficulties. Bueno, básicamente lo que Nasser estaba mencionando es que las viviendas han tenido una serie de progreso. Han habido renovaciones y modernizaciones de las viviendas, nuevos planes para viviendas asequibles, colaboración y financiación para apoyar a los inquilinos y propietarios. Y queremos mostrar la comparación, digamos, lo que vive un residente y lo que vive el dueño de estas propiedades cuando ocurren este tipo de eventos como inundaciones o calor extremo. Este mapa está indicando en el amarillo más oscuro la vivienda pública y asequible, y en el amarillo más claro la residencia en general del punto. 100 edificios de residencias y de usos mixtos se ven afectados durante este evento, y 24 públicos y asequibles. That would be all. Next.
27.
Yes.
Muchos.
Yes.
Oh, pero gracias. Next, please. So we know another priority for the neighborhood that's been expressed through the vision and action plans, et cetera, is jobs, education, career development, and small business support. We saw in the data, higher unemployment in the neighborhood, lower income. So we know this is important. And some progress has been made through the planning and implementation of those plans. Median income has increased about 20% from 2013 to 2019. We recognize the pandemic happened after that. Unemployment has decreased by about 58%, which is a lot, but it's still not good. And we know there are annual partnerships and funding with different partnerships and the city investing money and others investing money in helping small businesses. So how does this impact workers and customers and employers? Well, for example, workers may lose income, right? Or they may lose their job if their place where they work is impacted, if they can't get to work, for example. Customers may lose access to goods and services that could be temporary, right, during the storm, or it could be for a longer term. Because we know that 1 out of 4 businesses that experiences a disaster does not reopen afterwards, right? So it's important. I know that the community cares about the local businesses, and so it's important that we have concern for them. And for the employers, of course, there's potential for lost revenue, for costs, damage, dealing with all those things, and even those things like lower property values and higher insurance costs. In terms of the places where people work and the businesses that are in this area that we know is going to be more at risk in the future, but is already at risk today, we have a lot of different employers along Congress and Leavitt Street, as well as at Shetland Park.
Bueno, básicamente lo que se acaba de hablar en las diapositivas anteriores es que hay definitivamente un impacto hacia el empleo, la educación, el desarrollo profesional y el apoyo a pequeñas empresas del punto. Ha habido un progreso importante, el ingreso medio aumentó un 20% desde el 2013 al 2019, el desempleo disminuyó un 58%. Y han habido colaboraciones y financiación para apoyar a las pequeñas empresas del punto. Esto hizo que pues, se plantearan los 3 distintos escenarios para un trabajador o empleado, clientes y el empleador, lo que significa para cada uno de ellos este tipo de eventos y cómo los pueda afectar de una u otra manera. Y en este mapa podemos ver claramente edificios comerciales, edificios de industria, de uso mixto y de non-profits, dentro de los cuales está el Palmer Cove, el Club de Yates, el Punto Urban, el Museo de Arte Urbano, entre otros negocios y puntos importantes de, digamos que el sistema económico del punto. Yeah. That's all.
So when we look at the big picture of just buildings and land uses, what is impacted? So it's primarily residential and mixed use is part of that. Buildings are impacted. There are also commercial properties and industrial properties that are impacted, and also nonprofit organization buildings.
Este mapa muestra digamos que todos los edificios y sus usos de suelo, y muestra a la izquierda abajo muestra la cantidad de edificios que están siendo impactados por uso de suelo. Eso es básicamente lo que está mostrando este mapa. Next.
So another priority that we've seen in various different places that the community has expressed is a priority of creating parks and sidewalks and streets that are welcoming, clean, and safe. And a lot has been done in the neighborhood in terms of improving parks. All the recreational parks in the neighborhood have been improved at some point in the past 10 years. PBD Street Park is kind of the last one to be coming back. There are improved sidewalks and streets and bike routes and new trees that have been planted, the Harbor Walk, and also increased street cleaning. People were concerned about trash in the neighborhood and leaves, and there's been improvements in street cleaning to help improve the neighborhood quality.
Han habido una serie de progresos y proyectos para mejoras de parques públicos, arborización, mejora de calles, de rutas para bicicletas, aceras, entre otros elementos, y aumento de la limpieza de las calles. Acá simplemente queremos reconocer el distinto progreso que se ha realizado en el punto. Next.
So impacts to these recreation areas and the open space areas can impact people who use those places, the users, the visitors, people in the neighborhood. The danger of being exposed to flooding at a site, you could lose access or have a decreased quality of recreational facilities going forward. And for the city also has to deal with the damage that can happen to these parks and the cleanup costs of dealing with storm damage to these facilities. And it's already happened, right? When Palmer Cove flooded, right, there was impacts to the park.
Acá se están reconociendo los espacios abiertos y los lugares de recreación del punto y toda la serie de impactos que tienen usuarios y visitantes y digamos lo que también impacta a la ciudad de Salem como agencia de la ciudad que trata de manejar todos estos espacios. Y como acaba de decir Nasser, se pudo ver claramente en la inundación de Palmer Cove. Next.
So this map again shows, how do these areas that we know are going to be flooding more frequently and that are at risk today, what open spaces and recreational assets are in those areas. And what we see is that all recreational parks in the neighborhood and all the harbor walks are in this area of impact.
Ver todos los caminos del puerto que pueden ser impactados en el futuro, las distintas rutas de bicicleta, parques, gimnasios y digamos lugares importantes para la comunidad en temas de recreación y digamos que de actividades al aire libre. Next.
So some people mentioned in the Mentimeter, of course, concern about access to places that they go. So we know that impacts to the transportation system, to mobility and evacuation routes can affect people. Actually, the number one cause of drownings during floods is when people try to drive through a flooded road. They try to drive through water. So there's a saying that says, turn around, don't drown. So that's one piece of advice to leave you with from this meeting. Don't try to do that. But you can also lose access to your job, to your home, to childcare, to schools. And there's also other impacts from the damage to roads that the city of Salem has to deal with, the cleanup, not being able to get medical and emergency response services to an area because of flooding in the streets. And then afterwards cleaning up and then rebuilding damaged infrastructure.
Acá comenzamos a hablar sobre la movilidad y las rutas de evacuación y dividimos acá entre usuarios y lo que es la ciudad de Salem como otra vez como la agencia pública que se encarga de manejar todos estos bienes y vemos distintos riesgos en tema en las vías, la respuesta médica y de emergencias, las evacuaciones, el acceso a los empleos, los hogares, el cuidado de los niños. Ocurre mucho tráfico y congestión, hay pérdida de ingresos. Digamos que eso es como una serie de parámetros que queremos considerar. Y la ciudad de Salem, digamos que se ve expuesta a riesgos de seguridad, a poder suplir a la comunidad con respuesta médica y de emergencia. Hay costos de limpieza y de remoción de escombros y muchos daños en toda la infraestructura de la ciudad. Next.
So in terms of, again, the flooding map here showing what transportation, what mobility systems will be impacted by flooding more in the future and are at risk today. It includes things like impacting all of the bus routes through the neighborhood, which are very important for people to get to work and get around. Also impacts to Lafayette Street, you can see there near Derby, and also Congress Street in a couple of different places, key roads through the neighborhood, and also access to the Saltonstall School. You can see there, Salem Street is impacted as well. So these are all concerns for people.
el sistema, podemos ver claramente en el mapa cómo el sistema de buses se ve impactado por la inundación, como calles de gran importancia para la zona, como lo son Congress Street y Lafayette, también se ven impactados por estas inundaciones. Y, y básicamente como todo el sistema de movilidad podría verse afectado por estas vías principales verse inundadas en el futuro. Next.
Another priority that we've seen come out through the neighborhood expressing its interest here includes the need for public, community, and social support services that are provided in Spanish to residents of all ages and abilities. And some progress on this. There's a lot of really active community organizations, which helps to build a strong social capital, strong social network, which is important for resilience. And there's a lot of different services that are provided by these organizations in the city of Salem in partnership. Some of the community assets, community facilities, and also critical assets like for emergencies, the impact of these assets can result in the loss or the disruption or the degradation in those services, right? And they include things like school and daycare. And also for utilities and emergency response, we have an important power electrical facility that is in the flood area. And so we worry about loss of power. This can also happen at your building. You know, if something gets wet, you lose power. And then there's also potential for damage to community and cultural facilities.
En esta sección estamos hablando de todos los servicios de apoyo comunitario y social proporcionados en español a todos los residentes de todas las edades del punto. Como hay un progreso en coordinar todos los asuntos latinos de la ciudad, como hay una colaboración de financiamiento de servicios como vivienda, inmigración, educación, para personas mayores, para personas con discapacidades, alimentos, residentes sin hogar, entre otros. Y en esta diapositiva podemos ver dos factores importantes que son los servicios comunales, como es la pérdida, disrupción o degradación de servicios, que esos son las escuelas, las guarderías, los centros comunales, que tienen un valor muy importante para la comunidad y hace parte de su estructura social y digamos que lo que hace muy fuerte a esta zona de la ciudad. Por otro lado, tenemos los servicios públicos y la atención a emergencia, que también se ven amenazados por la inundación. En la zona, ahorita vamos a ver en el mapa, hay una subestación de electricidad y al verse afectada por la inundación puede haber una pérdida de potencia en este servicio eléctrico y eso puede afectar las necesidades básicas del punto. Hay daños de bienes y programas comunales y culturales que otra vez hacen parte fundamental de la infraestructura. Next.
So this is again a map showing the flooding area and the impacted assets that we were talking about here. Importantly, the fire station, which is kind of actually hidden behind this label here, but the fire station that serves the point, that is in the flood area, right? And its the route that it would take to get to the neighborhood, that is Lafayette, that is flooded, right? So that's of concern for the neighborhood. And of course, the flooding of the electrical facility that's there, but also importantly, Espacio. Espacio is the new community center that was built by North Shore CDC. Espacio is in the flood area, and it provides a lot of different services to the community, and so that's of course a concern, as well as a child care facility.
En este mapa podemos ver claramente cómo todos estos edificios se ven afectados por la inundación. Como lo pueden ver arriba, el cuadrado café es la subestación de electricidad y pues se vería afectado por la inundación nuevamente. Y la Fayette, que es la calle que está conectando hacia el norte, también estaría impactada por la inundación, que conecta adicionalmente con centros de salud, la estación de bomberos, entre otros. También, y muy importante para el proyecto considerar, es el impacto en espacio, que es esta organización que es clave para servicios comunitarios del punto. Entonces, para tener en cuenta esto en el momento de pensar en los impactos. Next.
So the final priority that we've identified, again, there are probably more, and we hope to learn from you about what those are through the interviews and through surveys, et cetera, and through this meeting, is a community that is proud of its history and invested in its future. And we see this, a lot of progress towards this. We see that this is something that people actually already value about the neighborhood, but it's something that people want to maintain. There's been implementation, really good implementation of the neighborhood plans. There's still more to do. The Point Historic District was created to capture the history of the neighborhood, including as an immigrant neighborhood. And there are also a lot of new community and cultural spaces, the murals, the Espacio, Punto Art Museum. These are all and youth leadership development programs. So we know that the community has been invested in making this a priority happen.
Esto es entender un poco que es una comunidad que está orgullosa de su historia y que quiere invertir en su futuro. Y hay un progreso importante para considerar, que es la implementación de planes en los vecindarios, este proyecto de El Punto como distrito histórico, nuevos espacios culturales y comunales como lo es Espacio o Punto Urban, el Museo Urbano, Fiesta en la Calle, y programas de formación de líderes y desarrollo de los jóvenes. Next.
So I think we've shown here that the climate change threatens to set back progress that has already been made in the point, and that it will also make long-term improvements more difficult if action is not taken very soon. So that is what's driving this project. Next, please. But again, focusing also on the positive side here is that climate change adaptation, which is basically us changing things about the way we behave or the way our environment is structured, and how we work together. Investment in climate change adaptation can help support these priorities. So again, we mentioned there are opportunities for investment in the point for climate change adaptation, that these investments will focus on protecting and enhancing community priorities as we understand them now and as that evolves based on what we learn from the community. And also that adaptation, climate change adaptation improvements can also provide multiple benefits and improve daily quality of life. So it's not just something that we spend money on that only helps us in a very extreme event today, but actually can help us make the neighborhood a better place to live. Next, please. So we'd like to open it up again. We're going to do kind of a series of questions here on Mentimeter. So hopefully you we haven't put you to sleep here with this or scared you into silence. But please pick up your phone or get back on that screen and share with us, based on what you've seen, what are some of the most important assets to you? That could be things like parks or schools or roads or buses, whatever, whatever that may be for you, your house. So we see homes, we see roadways, sidewalks, infrastructure, services, emergency response, historic places, parks. So we can see here that different people are focusing on different aspects, but essentially all the areas that we covered are being highlighted. People's homes, the parks that they visit, the services, both public and nonprofit, that they rely on when they're in need, the infrastructure that they use to get around, just to go shopping, to go to school, to go to work, businesses. Schools, home, arts, parks, families, health. I think this is capturing the broad set of issues we discussed. All right, let's move to the next question here. So again, recognizing that this plan it aims to address the priorities of the community. And many of you are community members or are part of the broader stakeholder group. And so we're looking for some early thoughts from you about what you think this plan should prioritize. Should it be focused on a particular area of the point? Should it be focused on a particular type of assets that we talked about today? It's a tough one. Well, that's okay. We're not there yet. People are unsure about what to prioritize. I see here some responses coming in, but it totally makes sense. This is the first time you're hearing a lot of this information, and it needs to sink in before really thinking about priorities. We do see here in a couple of places emergencies, sort of focusing on how to respond to reduce the risk to people's lives and health. Prevention, keeping seawater out of the neighborhood. So that's about protecting, right? We see here protect and minimize damage. So be prepared for emergencies, but do what we can to keep those emergencies from happening. Protecting residents, protecting people's housing. This is great. All right, I think we'll move to the next question. This is not going to be the last chance you have to answer this question. So this is just the first check of the temperature of the room here. And so the next question is what kind of solutions do you imagine? This is a pretty broad question, but humor us. You're free to answer it however you feel. ¿Qué tipo de soluciones se imagina? That's fair. We're jumping ahead, several steps in the phases of this project. One of the things that this team is going to be doing through outreach, through community mapping, and through helpful visualizations and bringing kind of a toolbox to the community and helping you figure out what makes the most sense is to really create that imagination, to help inspire different ideas and to help evaluate those and choose the ones that are right for the neighborhood. But we see here already some answers coming in. So would like the city to prioritize green solutions and creating a buffer at the water line. So the idea that, can we improve the environment while also protecting the neighborhood? That's one set of solutions that we will certainly be talking more about as we move forward. Redesigning parks to absorb more water, sort of the same idea. There are some immediate infrastructure improvements, information to residents about how to be as ready and prepared as possible. So again, talking about emergencies and being prepared for those rare situations when they occur, but also investing in more trees, parks that help protect the neighborhood. This is great. And of course, community. So prepare to mobilize everyone and everything to more safe areas. So part of that emergency response, maybe it's, helping people know, where do we go when something like this is going to happen, or after it happens, where do we go? Waterproofing buildings. So maybe water gets in, maybe water comes into the neighborhood, but can buildings be made safer to keep the buildings functioning and to make sure that the residents or the people who work there, are safer and can continue to use those buildings afterwards. Remove some pavement. These are great ideas. I think we should just keep this open for a little bit longer to make sure we get everybody who wants to share some ideas to go ahead and do so. All right, well, I don't see any new ones coming in at this point, so thank you for submitting these. Again, we have an online survey on the website. That's publicinput.com/el punto for Spanish, or the point for English. And you can go to that website and there's a survey there where we ask similar questions. And we have obviously documented these answers here that we have today, but there's also opportunities if you have a neighbor you're talking to and you want them to also share their opinion, please, we encourage you to encourage them. You are important for this message to get out. Next, please.
Next is the Q&A. So perhaps we can leave this slide on so people can still submit some phrases as they come in. And Esmeralda, if you want to walk us through the Q&A or take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So all the questions that have been asked have been answered, typed out. If anyone has additional questions, please put them in the Q&A box. If anyone wants to reply live now, in addition to the text reply that they did, you can do that now.
Yes, Esmeralda, I just would like to say something to Lucy about the project, when the project ends. So we are supposed to, the project is going to produce the final report by the end of June. But between now and more or less the beginning of May, we at the Gaston Institute, we are reaching out to residents in the point to participate in some of the activities. We had the community mappings that, as I explained, is just going with a small groups of residents around the community, so you can tell us your experiences in particular spaces and places in El Punto where you have experienced climate change in some way. But also we are inviting you to contact us for any interviews. We are planning to have interviews with residents, social community workers, public officials who might be interested in interviewing and tell us a little bit about the perceptions of climate change, your perceptions, and the perceptions of the community. This is going to happen between now and the end of April. So this is enough time for you to contact us. Thank you, Esmeralda.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Lucy. She said she is able to help us as well.
Thank you, Lucy. And we welcome more Lucy's volunteer.
A lot of thank yous. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
We also welcome any feedback in the Q&A box on the format of this presentation. If you have any suggestions on how we better can run these meetings, we would welcome that feedback as well.
And we're also looking for a climate ambassadors in the community to help us get the word out and help with social media. You can contact Esmeralda. You can see it on the city's website under jobs. If you have anybody you know who'd like to help, please let us know. And these are paid
Excellent.
positions.
That's really fantastic. So the city has some paid positions available for people that want to help serve as climate ambassadors. So again, please spread the word. The next steps for this project include doing more community outreach and activities, including interviews and community mapping event. We're also working currently on some of the modeling to better understand the rainfall flooding that we talked about earlier, and to do a more thorough assessment of vulnerabilities with input from the community and a better sense for all those different types of flooding impacts. Those are the immediate next steps. So we encourage you to stay involved. Again, our website has information. We'll include the recording today for this meeting. If someone has missed it, please share it with them. There are public surveys that you can fill out there that have similar questions as were asked today to this community. So if someone hasn't participated and you think they have something interesting to share or just have something to share, please encourage them to go to the website and participate in that. And of course, as we mentioned before, please contact Fabian. His email is here, and he would love to support you in participating in interviews. If you have any questions about what that means and how your information or your identity is dealt with, please let him know, and he'll be happy to assist and answer those questions. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Just a couple questions that came in that I just want to say out loud. Someone asked, is there a plan to target or reach out to those who are not on board with all of it, especially those in positions of power who make decisions for people? I will say I've luckily not come in contact with people who are not at least a little bit on board with what we're doing, but we are definitely in contact with, all of the city councilors, the mayor's on board, some state senators as well. So if anyone has suggestions on who else we should be in contact with, you can definitely email me. My email is ebisono@salem.com, EBISONO@salem.com. John Hayes also wrote that it'd be a good idea to submit photos of flooding that people see in the point. So you can also email me those pictures, or our Resilient Together social media you see on the bottom left. You can DM us on there. We have direct access to those accounts. So any other photos that you see that we can post online would be great.
And as part of the public survey, there's also a mapping tool where you can identify areas that you've experienced or know of that flood, and you can attach photos there as well.
Yes, thank you. All right, if there are no more questions, I think we can wrap up. Oh, Julia from CZM also wrote, You can also add photos to mycoast.org/mass. Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. Please stay in contact and we'll see you at the next events or out on the streets as we table with everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.